or Torrington or Kent or any of those.
Well, the thing is that those towns don't have a Katie. So
Some do.
some have a Katie type person. Yeah. Well, like Kent used to, and it is missing theirs now. So I haven't done, I mean, I know what the waiting lists look like at all the, affordable housing developments in the region, for example. And as you know, they're quite long. But I haven't talked in the last couple of weeks to the folks in Katie's position and the other towns.
Well, at the meeting on Friday, Jocelyn, the gentleman from Washington Depot commented that the how did he say this? The number of the houses for sale in Washington Depot a year or two ago were 500, and they're now in the millions, right? Isn't that what he said?
Yeah.
And there's nothing. There's just no. And like Chris is saying, there's no stock for people that just want to buy your $200,000 house. Or if there is, they're certainly snatched up very quickly within days.
Hours.
In some cases. Hours. Right. So Candy, the calls the only calls that I ever, or the only cases I guess that I ever get involved with that are not from Winstead would be someone who would be leaving the YMCA shelter and wanting to stay in Winstead, and that typically doesn't happen because there isn't any housing for them. So that typically doesn't happen. They tend to go to Torrington or Waterbury or wherever they're originally from. So all the calls that I've gotten lately have been, I wish I had thought to brought it with me. I did have a call from someone whose aging parent, is living in an apartment that was in a house that was sold, and the landlord's increasing the rent, and she's on a fixed income and can't afford it. That's probably the most common phone call that I get.
All right.
Yeah, I know everybody's been selling the houses because everything's worth so much more. So
right.
Everybody's kind of getting out, and then they're jacking the prices up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same reason for the evictions. They need to get the tenants out so they can sell the property.
I spoke to that Nathan Selinsky, I think his name is. Pam, you know him from.
Yeah.
He was talking with me the other day, and he told me that it's taken him 2 months to get his quote buildings back. And I asked him what he meant, and he said it's taken him 2 months to get everybody out. And now he's got to fix things up. And he doesn't want to rent to anybody who doesn't have a credit score of 600, at least 650, makes, I don't know, 2 or 3 times the amount of the rent, and has 3 documented references. And he'd prefer to rent to people with subsidized housing because he's guaranteed to get that rent. And he told me he has 40 units in town.
Wow.
I didn't know that he had that many, but I'm surprised he was able to do it in 2 months. It takes typically a lot longer than that.
Yeah, and I think he was referring to, like the whole, since the eviction was lifted, it's taken him, that long to get everybody out so that he can clean up his apartments and get them re-rented again. But he's very particular about who he'll rent to, and so is Impetus. Impetus told me that they're looking for credit scores of 650 at least.
Yeah.
All right. So this is important to talk about too, but I also want to make sure we get through what we need to get through today. So I hope you're seeing the screen here. This is the document I had sent out. And this first part is just kind of outlining what I would foresee would be in your housing plan, kind of a table of contents. We don't have to talk about this much today. You can give me feedback at any time about how it's organized or what's in here. But I just wanted to give you a sense for, these are the pieces of information I will be planning to put together into a plan draft over the coming months to get back to you. So if you see anything in here, you see something missing, you think it would be better organized in a different way for your purposes, let me know. This section here is just like, in my mind, this housing plan document is both an instrument to help the town think of specific strategies to meet your specific housing needs. But also it can be an educational document for folks who aren't familiar with what the town's existing housing needs are or what the existing housing resources are. So some of the sidebars that we can put in there kind of can explain some of that to folks who might be reading this for the first time. Like they might not know what the housing authority is or who the Winchester Housing Development Corp is. And if there's other kind of frequently asked questions that you get, like why does the town need to be involved in this? We can try to answer them in sort of sidebars in the plan if you think it would be helpful. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this today unless any of you have questions or comments on it now. But as we move ahead, if you have thoughts about what should be included or shouldn't be included, just reach out to me. Any comments on this kind of outline at this point?
Is this anticipated to be an interactive kind of outline? Something that's going to be put on a website? Because when you say possible sidebars and I'm not understanding what we're doing here at that point.
Yeah, so typically I try to make these plans not just like Word documents, but easy to read with pictures and bullet points and sidebars. And so that's what I mean by a sidebar. It'll be a PDF document. And so it will have like clickable links.
Okay.
So a lot of these things that are appendix, like it's just kind of things they can click on, links they can click on if they want more information on some topic.
Gotcha.
Because my goal will be for it to not be a 100-page document. It would be like a 12-page document that's easy to read, where you get the information you need, and then here's a bunch of appendices if you want more information.
Okay.
All right. So is it okay if I move on to goals and strategies?
Sure.
All right. So as I mentioned, what I try to do here is think about kind of not only an updated version of what we talked about at the last meeting in terms of goals and strategies, but who might do those strategies. And we don't have to answer all of those questions today, but I just wanted to have the committee thinking about it in that context. So, again, the first goal, which we talked about last time, is this idea of really investing in Winchester's existing buildings and existing housing stock. The first one is just continuing to work with property owners of mill buildings and other vacant spaces that could be converted to housing. This is what they could have a bunch of different, one of the other things I wanted to say is for some of these, so some towns, as you might know, have decided to create like a town housing committee or commission where the Board of Selectmen usually appoint those folks, and they're tasked with spearheading the effort to get the housing plan done and implemented over the next 5 years, and working with all of the other folks that might be tasked with strategies to move things ahead. So that's why I have this kind of proposed up here. If you guys hate that idea, I can take it out. It's just that on some of the strategies, if I don't have any sense of who could do them, those might be the ones that if you wanted to consider creating that kind of committee in town, it might be helpful if there are things that you think are important to get done and there's nobody to point to who might do them. So I'm not sure if anyone noticed that and was like, well, what's this housing commission thing? And again, we can take that out. But that's what I was thinking when I put it in there. So I don't know how you guys wanna, do you want me to just read these, or do you want to? You know, they're just revised from the last meeting. Go ahead, Katie.
Does everybody, is everybody aware of what's going on at the Old Winston Hospital?
No.
I don't
So-
think Mark or I are. What's going on?
Yeah,
So,
so maybe you can update on that, Jess.
yeah, so I heard through the grapevine that the folks at the Winstead Health Center Foundation were working with, and this might be very preliminary, but they're meeting with Waterbury Neighborhood Housing Services to look at redeveloping some of the vacant space there into housing. They were, I think, so I spoke with the executive director of Waterbury Neighborhood Housing Services to ask him kind of what was happening there. And he said at this point, I mean, my understanding is at this point, they're having kind of monthly meetings, which they're happy to invite other folks to talk about how that might happen. So I think it's very early on, but I thought we should kind of loop them into this, this group and this thinking about what could happen at that property.
And they would seek funding from HUD?
Again, depending on who they're trying to serve, I mean, they were talking about potentially having it serve veterans, but I think they're thinking more broadly now, but it would be, targeted for folks earning under 80% of the area median income, I believe. So, so they could apply to Department of Housing or HUD or VA, like, again, depending on what population they were trying to serve.
And they're basically developers, right? When
Yes.
I looked at their website, it just seemed like they have developed all kinds of different things all over the place.
Yeah, they are nonprofit, mission-driven developers. I mean, I've not known the neighborhood housing services folks to go kind of so far away from their core area. But I think if that, they are a nonprofit developer, and if having some housing options at the hospital is of interest to the town, then it makes sense to, I think, get in the loop of the conversation about what could happen there.
And they're talking about efficiencies and one bedrooms. Is that accurate?
And these conversations are just with the foundation, right? With the hospital
Yes.
foundation.
Yeah. Again, I think it's early days, like feasibility conversations.
Huh.
Yeah, but he's meeting with Chris Griffin. And again, he said he's happy to have anybody from this group attend one of his monthly meetings if they would like to. Yeah, he did say that they were thinking of, again, this is early feasibility conversations as far as I know, but they were thinking of studios and one bedrooms.
Can I just throw something out as we start this conversation? Because I did read everything that you had in there and stuff. On the Fair Housing Commission, I think that's a good idea to do. I also think that we're going to be hiring a town planner soon. And it just seems to me that, probably because I serve in all the various roles I'm in, that there seems to be a lot of things independently working, but not working together.
Disconnect.
Well, I don't think there's an overall plan, like, the overall plan, like what do we need in town? I mean, where do we need it? Where do we want to put it? What are we trying to do with other things? How does everything fit? And I think that's going to be my question through this whole thing. And I was with my father in the emergency room. That's why I was in there
Oh.
before, and now I'm in between, so.
So everything's okay there, I hope. Okay, yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, is to make sure everything is working. Everyone's talking to each other, and that's always the hardest thing. But yeah, that's a very good point. So I guess I will just, so yes, thank you, Katie, for bringing up that one, because that did happen since the last meeting, the conversation about the Winstead Hospital. So this is just the first one's just a general strategy. The second one is specific to the Winstead Hospital. The third one came up at the last meeting, which is the elementary school potential reuse someday. This one I actually moved to another section, the Wallens Hill one. So is there anything in here that people are not comfortable with or want to delete?
Yeah, it's me again. Now that I've been unmasked.
Yep.
I guess what I want to say about some of these things, and I've mentioned this, is that some of these properties we haven't even had a discussion with, and they're mentioned in here. And there's other pieces that are mentioned in here. I'd like to see it be a little bit more generic and not mention so many specific parcels, because there's other people in town, like with the blight properties we've taken, there's neighbors there that could get quite, worried about what was going to happen because it hasn't really been defined. The Wallens Hill property, we haven't even had a discussion about it. The Bachelor School, we're just starting to get that back, and to start identifying all of this, I think, is getting way out ahead of the rest of us, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And that's part of the kind of thing I wanted to hear today. If the town is not, we can talk about these things in a more general way, like you said, and until there is some more, until the town has had the chance to have some more conversations about them.
Right. I think like saying something general, the town should look at, at the properties that are town owned and are available at this time to, have a good conversation within the housing plan about it, or potential ways to solve the housing problem. And like you could say, like town owned, I think it would be fine to, say property that we've taken. I think it's great to talk about the fact that, the fair, like I said, the Fair Rent Commission, in terms of people are getting, priced out or having troubles. I think all of that's okay. I just think that the specific properties is what I'm more worried about.
Okay. Is that okay with everybody else? That seems like a fine thing to me.
Yeah.
And with the like the old Winstead Hospital, you could make that more generic if we're going to go along that lines and say the town will keep have a close relationship and or we'll try to stay connected with the foundations and the entities that own private property. In that particular incident, is it the foundation that calls the shots in terms of how things are developed there?
Well, after planning and zoning, they're the owner.
Yeah, besides that part.
Yeah,
I just
the
meant
foundation.
like in terms of like ownership interests.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Well, and I guess one thing I could do is I could invite Kevin and or Chris to come to the next steering committee meeting if you wanted to hear more about what they're thinking for the old Winstead Hospital.
Kevin and Chris are on the foundation.
Sorry, Kevin is the executive director of the Neighborhood Housing Services in Waterbury, and Chris is the executive director of the Winstead Health Center.
I would suggest that they meet with Mark Melanson before they get too far into a plan. Do you know if they've retained an architect?
No, again, I think it's very early days.
Very early.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I think they may be. Mark, is it tougher to go from the hospital to residential, or is it reverse of that?
It's a sprinkler building, so there shouldn't be much issue with that. It's just the architect's gonna have to, just the way he designs it, will have to work with everything.
Okay. Yeah.
And Jocelyn, did you say that this was mostly, are these going to be Waterbury residents because there's such an overflow in Waterbury, or is this going to be open up?
No,
Okay, that's what I was confused at.
no, they're just a mission-driven developer. It doesn't mean that they are bringing people with them. But I think, I guess I was just trying to get back to whether this was something you wanted to, if this committee knew more about the development and the, Winstead Health Center was was fine with it being mentioned in the plan. Again, I just didn't know if you would like to have more information so you could decide whether it made sense to call it out in the plan or not.
Well, it sounds promising.
Well, but I think that Candy's recommendation of keeping it more general, I mean, you can tweak that second to just support the redevelopment of vacant space to create housing opportunities by participating in regular meetings with interested developers and current property owners, something like that, where, to encourage the meetings, encourage the conversations and the dialogue for the planning, but.
Yeah.
Right, Candy? Well, you're driving. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, right. Because sometimes these conversations are real preliminary and they could perhaps, affect other development.
Yeah. Okay, I will just say, and I think that's fine for the purpose of the planning document. I always think it's so helpful to have at least these committee conversations about specific possibilities, even just to know kind of what's out there as a maybe.
Yeah.
And to think about, like, once we get to this section of the zoning analysis, like, again, it's so much easier to think about how zoning affects specific properties than it is to think about how it affects everything. Even just a case study, not even as a real exercise. So, okay, so we'll be more general about the opportunity, that not naming any specific addresses or properties. Any other concerns about anything in this section or questions? So I'll move on to the next goal was around creating housing options for young adults and students. As you know, with that survey of the community college students, a lot of folks said they'd love to live in Winchester. And so this was just, these are pretty general. I don't know if you wanna, again, if 10 Bridge Street is something that you want, if that's another example of something you wanna not call out specifically and just be more general. Should that be more general too?
Yes.
I don't know. I
Yes.
have no
Okay.
conversations with those folks at all.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if we're trying to make this as uniform as possible, then I think, yes, we should try and have it be more general. On the other hand, that is a parcel where the owners have specifically expressed a want to develop it in certain directions. So I don't know if maybe we want to make an exception for buildings where the town has been engaged to some extent to help facilitate some of those improvements and conversions into housing.
The only thing with that
Right,
is
but on
that
the other
this,
side
this,
of things, though, is
Go
that
ahead.
you have, Joe Miller just had half the products, and there's a lot of work that's gonna go in there too. So I think that once you get the planner on board, and Ted has been here longer, and you get out from underneath the budget, Josh, I think you guys could start to do an overall kind of plan for the whole area, and what fits and doesn't fit and where we're going, so that people that see this plan, which is going to be way ahead of all of you, that people can get a kind of a direction and a grasp for what the planner will be doing in terms of bringing it all together.
Fair enough. I just wanted to voice the fact that I think there is at least a little bit of a difference between some of these parcels.
Yeah, and I would agree, just to again, in my experience with the housing plans in other towns, if there is a property owner, who is ready for public, a public, they've looked into this use and they're ready to talk about it publicly, then I think it makes sense potentially for the town, if the town wants to support it, to have it in their housing plan. And the towns I've worked with are kind of all over the place on this. The town of Salisbury named 7 very specific town-owned properties in their plan. They were ready to name them. And other towns have not named any specific properties, and some towns, again, are in between, depending on the situation, if the property owner is ready to talk about it in that way. So I think let's just, keep looking at it as we go along, and thinking about what makes the most sense for each property as we progress in this conversation. So first-time home buyer options. Again, we talked about this stuff last time.
Mhm.
Making folks more aware of the resources that are out there. Again, potentially looking at town-owned sites. We don't need to name which one. And that could potentially be used for first-time home buyer options. And again, thinking about basically other properties that the town owns. Everybody okay with these?
Mhm.
Preserve and support the existing affordable housing for seniors. As you know, most of your affordable housing units that are dedicated to remaining affordable over time are for seniors. So you've got 216 of those now, and just again, making sure that it's on your radar to make sure those units continue to be, safe and affordable for the folks that live there. And I don't think, did Jane join us today?
I don't think so. I was looking for it.
I think this task here is just, I think it's worth a conversation about whether some way of partnering between the Winchester Housing Authority and the Winchester Housing Development Corporation could happen that would help both entities be more financially sustainable over the long term. And that's a conversation I'd be happy to help with. And it's more of a long-term discussion about how to just make sure that those units stay affordable and are financially sustainable over time. These look okay with you guys? Do you guys?
Mhm.
All right.
I think so.
So keeping seniors in their homes, I don't think anyone probably is going to argue with those strategies, which we talked a little bit about last time. Any questions on those? Okay. And the next one talks about the Fair Rent Commission. And Katie, so that's already going?
Well,
Or
I don't know, Josh, do you want to respond to that?
Sorry, this is regarding the Fair Rent Commission.
Yes.
So I've had the opportunity to send information along to the Board of Selectmen. I've made my recommendation that this is something that we look at as a town, and that I hope that the Board of Selectmen will act on. But that's really where we are in the planning process around it. We haven't had a formal in-person discussion about it by any stretch of the imagination. And certainly I wouldn't want to push to have something like that adopted before anything is decided with the budget and our bond referendum. There's just a little more on the Board of Selectmen's plate than usual, and well, a lot more. And I wouldn't want to overload it and just try and force something through that we don't have the proper amount of time to discuss. So I imagine that in May, either at the first or second meeting in May, I'll at least introduce the idea publicly at a meeting with the Board of Selectmen. And I would expect that sometime in June, they might be able to make a final determination on establishing one. In the meantime, Katie and I have been talking about, if we're going to propose this, we should probably have people in mind that might be able to serve. So that's been our homework. And certainly if anybody on this in this group is interested in such a thing or has somebody in mind, please pass it along. That's really where we stand.
well, I think since Nick is not here today, we can nominate him for that.
There you go.
He actually did, when he reached out to me to let me know he wouldn't be here today, he did say, I asked him whether there was anything he wanted me to relay to this committee, and he did say that his one thing he wanted to relay was his support for the Fair Rent Commission. So, and in his day job, I think he is also seeing, again, this kind of wave of evictions happening right now. So, okay, so I'll keep this in here for now. And again, I'm not thinking that we're going to be presenting this publicly till, maybe late May at the earliest, so we can revisit how you want to talk about it once you've had a chance to have that conversation. With
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. And then the last group of strategies is around, again, this, hoping that that you'll want to implement your plan once it's adopted. What are some ways of making sure that happens? Do you guys have any feelings about the idea of creating a town housing commission?
I wonder if that's I wonder how a housing commission and a fair rent commission would work. I'm just thinking about that. Is the fair rent commission a branch of the housing commission? Is it two completely separate things? I don't know.
Well, it could be the same thing.
Right.
And again, it goes back to, and that's why I was trying to put some entities, initials next to every strategy. So maybe, I can go back after the meeting and think about what are the holes that we have where you'd want someone to do them, and maybe the Fair Rent Commission could do it. There are some towns that make this housing plan part of their town plan of conservation and development, or an appendix to their town plan. And then the Planning and Zoning Commission is tasked with, spearheading implementation in the same way that they implement your town plan of conservation and development. So that's another, way that some towns are doing it. In any
Which
case,
also makes sense to me. I mean, that makes good sense as well.
In any case, I think it's always, and I recommend this for town plan of conservation and development implementation as well, but having at least one meeting a year where you go back to the plan and you say, have we made progress on this? Why haven't we made progress on this? Who's going to do this? What are our priority steps for the next year? And just to hear what progress has been made, I think is a good strategy for making sure that this doesn't just get put on a shelf for 5 years. Do you want to talk about this idea of a town ordinance that could create a town housing fund, or do you? I mean, as I might have mentioned in past meetings, this is something. So the town of Goshen has, I think in Goshen, it's actually called a land acquisition fund. But they allocate a portion of the conveyance fees that they collect to go into this acquisition fund. And then nonprofits or town entities can apply to the Board of Selectmen to use it for certain specified purposes. Again, I'm just throwing it out there but you don't have to. Should I leave it in there, or should we take?
I'm curious what people think about that.
I think right now, we need to wait until after we see what happens with next year's budget. Right now, all the conveyance fees and everything go into the, town clerks, come into the town clerk's budget and whatnot. And, a lot of that money is being used to offset a lot of costs in the current budget. So to start talking about taking money from there, I would say if it was going to town acquisitions, but when you talk about it going to nonprofits, that's another little bit of money that would be leaving the money that we're operating with right now.
Yeah, because it would divert funding that's currently going into the town budget generally into this fund that could only be used for something specific. So you would want to know what the impact to your budget would be on that. Okay. And then again, I was just in terms of capacity building, I was just thinking about your existing entities in town that are managing your existing affordable housing and or potentially available to do any new projects. Again, like the Winchester Housing Authority or the Winchester Housing Development Corporation, and thinking about ways to build their capacity. If you want to do more development, I think ideally you'd have an entity in Winstead to be able to do that and not necessarily have to rely on developers from outside to come in and do it. So just thinking about how we could increase the capacity of those organizations to be able to do new projects as they might come along.
Justin, I just have a quick question as people are thinking about what you just said. Do you have a sense of maybe how many established nonprofit or affordable housing developers are in Litchfield County, like actively working on moving these things forward, that are more like on the upper tier?
When you say upper tier,
More established. For example, you know, in the past, you and I have discussed, I remember you helped me with resources on finding well-established architects that have worked on senior housing projects,
yeah,
which was very helpful. You know, there were, I can't remember how many, to say 4 or 5 that we were able to get some RFQs from and have a conversation. So that was very helpful. Does that, in your mind, does that kind of exist? Can you think of, I'm just trying to get a feel, I guess, for the group. You talked about doing things internally here in Winchester, you know, compared to working with those outside of our borders. So thought I'd throw that out there.
Well, what I can show you, and I was going to show you guys this anyway. So this is back to, you know, Katie, this is the Regional Housing Council meeting we had last Friday that Katie came to. And we had representatives from, I don't know, I think 13 or 14 nonprofit affordable housing developers. Most of them are local, so they just do it in their town. And so they wouldn't be in, so like the Norfolk Foundation for Living, which is doing affordable housing in Norfolk, probably wouldn't be interested in developing, you know, first-time home buyer options in Winstead. I don't know that for sure, but that's typically how most of these groups are, you know, especially in the smaller towns. You know, we have 5 housing authorities within Litchfield County. Again, those are usually town specific. They don't go outside of their boundaries. So, you know, I think it would be great, again, to build up either the Housing Authority or the Winchester Housing Development Corporation's capacity to take on new projects. They could partner with another entity outside of Winchester. But in my view, it's always great to have those groups that have board members with volunteers that are from your town, kind of sponsoring those projects. And the other reason I pulled up these slides, oh, are you guys seeing these slides? What are you seeing?
Just no, we're only seeing, it looks like number 13.
Oh, okay. So I'm looking at the slides that I'm trying to show you.
They were appearing, but you only had highlighted number 13 of the slides.
All right, are you seeing this one that says coordinating a regional
Yeah.
response?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is just kind of the entities that are in Litchfield County that do affordable housing development. And I just wanted to show you a couple things in terms of, you know, projects that other towns are doing. You know, Barkhamsted has a housing trust. I mean, you could, in theory, create a new entity in town. The Barkhamsted Housing Trust is a 501c3, all volunteer organization made up of, you know, residents from Barkhamsted. They are developing the property behind Mallory
Brook. Yep.
Yeah, this is Mallory Brook Plaza. And they purchased this property and are planning to develop 20 units of housing, 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms for seniors, young people, and families. Their town had an incentive housing zone on this site, meant to create this type of development. I'm just going to show you some of these examples and you can stop me. Falls Village Housing Trust, again, they're a local group of volunteers in town. They are proposing 16 rental units. They're going to look kind of like this. It's interesting. You know, they've got like a typical kind of 3-bedroom house attached by a garage to like a 1 or 2 bedroom meant for seniors. It's all one floor. So that's what they're doing in Falls Village. Litchfield has a well-established housing trust, as some of you might know. They have over 46 first-time home buyer homes scattered through the town. Right now, they're working on something called Gagarin Place. It's under construction right now, which is actually 8 houses in a neighborhood, first-time home buyers, affordable. They're going to have solar on the roof, so they'll be, I think, close to net zero. Norfolk, Foundation for Norfolk Living, right next to you, they're doing 10 affordable homes, net zero, solar carports, first-time home buyers, and also downsizing options for older buyers. Again, they're an all-volunteer nonprofit made up of Norfolk residents. This is in Salisbury, where I live. This is Salem Village. We're an all-volunteer nonprofit, the Salisbury Housing Committee, Inc. We've also purchased recently this house that had 6 apartments in it, and we're renovating it with state funding to remain affordable. Let's see what else. The town of Washington, which Katie mentioned earlier, they've got also a housing trust. Their housing trust does both rental and home ownership. Their current project is actually just 3 first-time home buyer affordable homes on, I think it's a 3-acre parcel that was donated to them. It's called Vincent Farm. And they're working on another one of these. So, I mean, I don't want to bore you, but there's lots of example projects out there. But I do think it's really good to have entities within a town that can, at least they don't have to be the developer. They could partner with, other folks. All of these projects I just showed you work with one development consultant, David Berto. He was the one that came to our last meeting, and he puts together all of the funding applications. He helps them with the expertise that you need at each step in the process. And actually my center hopes to be able to do that with nonprofit, all volunteer organizations too. But again, just thinking about what entity in town could take on future projects. In my mind, it makes sense to have a board of volunteers from Winchester. At least that's how I've seen it work in the other towns in the region. So the only other thing I did want to show you quickly, and we don't have to talk about it too much, is just, obviously one of the things that we look at during this process is kind of what does your zoning allow currently in terms of residential uses? And I just, many of you might be familiar with your table of uses. So I just cut and pasted because it's very long, just the residential uses allowed. And one of the things that is a takeaway for me and is common, frankly, in most of our towns is that aside from single family house on 2 acres, for example, it's hard to do much without a special permit. And the special permit process can be very challenging, I will say. Again, it's pretty common, but I think all of our planning and zoning commissions could think a little bit more about whether they need to use the special permit for certain uses. I think some uses could potentially be by site plan review rather than pushing it all the way to a special permit process, especially if you're thinking about something like a 2-family on 2 acres. So for example, in your rural residential district, where you need basically 2 acres to build a house, you can't build a duplex or a 2-family. You are allowed an accessory apartment by special permit, but as you might know, an accessory apartment is smaller than the primary dwelling. So, we can talk about this in detail or not, but my takeaways were, for example, one option would be to consider allowing 2 families in rural residential. Obviously, you'd have to be able to accommodate the well and septic for 2 units. You could make it by special permit, but currently it's not allowed at all. And I wonder, Pam or Mark, is the Planning and Zoning Commission planning to opt out of?
They did.
They did already opt out. Okay.
Almost immediately, if that is any indication of where they sit on this type of thing.
Yeah. Well, and to me, I don't personally fall on my sword for accessory apartments, because what we see typically is that they're often used just for guests or family members. So they don't necessarily create, if they're just being used for guests, they're not creating long-term housing options. So they did opt out.
They did, yeah.
And then, have you looked at your multifamily regulations since PA 2129 was passed?
Have they reviewed them?
Yeah. Because I
No.
think it puts a cap of 30 units per building. I'm not sure if that's allowed.
Yeah, right. There's a couple things that our next commission initiated round of changes should address, so that we're compliant with current legislation that was passed just recently.
You're working
Yeah.
on that.
No, I'm aware that we have some conflicts.
Okay.
We're going to take out the word character, all of that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then the only other thing that jumped out at me in terms of if the town wants to encourage the reuse of mill buildings, for example, and I know this is tricky, it's always that balance between, local control and oversight and, the cost and burden to a redeveloper. But so when I was thinking about, again, the reuse of mill buildings, it seems like that would fall under this industrial heritage reuse regulation.
Yeah, except for parking. Parking has historically been perceived as a challenge in the town center zone. And I say perceived because, I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with it, but it's definitely been, so that would be why, but I had heard with 10 Bridge Street that if they were to add, like parking garages on the first couple of floors, so if you got a good, if you got an application that the commission was inclined to get behind, part of that process could be to tweak the regs, to allow them to approve it. But that's why, the industrial heritage reuse, the only probably, immediate resistance would be because of the parking that's associated with, residential use. And how does that affect the commercialism in the downtown area?
Yeah. Well, and I was just thinking as a, looking at this from an outsider's perspective, and as a developer who might be interested in reuse of either that specific building or others, again, just trying to think about, making it by special permit instead of site plan review. Maybe an intensive use requires that. Maybe some other uses don't. But also, having the applicant, a special permit process is just way more unknown whether you're going to get the permit or not, as which is, it's just hard and this is true of all special permits and all developers, is like, how much money do I want to spend taking something to the Planning and Zoning Commission under a special permit, not knowing whether I'm going to get it or not. And also having to pay for the town to hire consultants to review my proposal.
But if you see how development goes, they are inclined to, like, they meet twice a month, and I mean, you can get approval on a special permit within 2 weeks.
Okay.
So when a prospective developer is looking at a piece of property and, that use they really need, but the use is granted through a special permit, their contract language can always, add a contingency clause that the special permit is received. And I mean, it can, they'll receive it at one meeting and 2 weeks later hold the public hearing. I mean, that's pretty fast. And they don't often pass along outside consultant fees. Like, 6 years I've been here, and planning and zoning at least has never asked for any kind of traffic engineering consultants. They haven't. If it's a project that makes sense for the community, it's pretty easy.
Okay, that's great. All right, so I mean, that was what I wanted to review with you guys today. I did want to see if we could at least think through when you might want to have the next community feedback forum. This group meets again on May 11th. So probably sometime after that, we could talk on the 11th about being prepared for that meeting. But do we want to think about late May? Does late May sound okay to you guys?
Yeah.
Sure.
That's
Yep.
fine by me.
So maybe
Should
I
we-
will, unless everyone has their calendars in front of them. Can I throw out the idea of May 24th? Which is the 4th Tuesday.
What time are you thinking?
Well, and I guess the other question for you guys is, do you want to do this next community feedback forum, again, where we tell people kind of what the goals and strategies are that are being proposed and get their feedback? Do you want to do it by Zoom, or do you want to do it in person? I don't know. I don't know what kind of, if you guys have a hybrid setup that's good or not at all. Okay. Are you still doing most planning and zoning meetings in person or?
In person.
Okay.
In person. Yeah.
One thing I will just say, one pro of Zoom meetings in this case is that we can use the polling function, so that we can ask people whether they support a certain goal or not, and they can choose yes, no, or not sure. And then we can immediately show everyone what the responses are. Do you
have those clickers, or would we be able to borrow the clickers from the COG?
So the clickers, unfortunately, they only work with a certain kind of computer that's old. And I don't think we have any computer around anymore. I used to use my personal computer that's now died because it was the only one that would talk to those clickers. I mean, we can do raising hands, or we can do sticker voting. It's just a little more like, it's pretty anonymous to poll people on Zoom because you can't tell who said yes, no, or unsure. If you make people raise their hand or vote with a sticker, but we can do it however you guys, I mean, in my mind, it's just getting as many people to give us their feedback as possible. So if you think in person will get us more feedback, let's do it in person. If you think doing it virtually will get us more feedback, let's do it that way.
I mean, my thought was that we had one community input meeting and that was held via Zoom. Maybe we should really give an opportunity for folks who don't have technology or the know how to use technology to come in person, weigh in.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. And May 24th is good for me too.
So we usually do them in the evening, you know, for people that work. So when do your evening meetings usually start around 7?
Yeah, yep.
So it'd be maybe, I think we're proposing Tuesday, May 24th, 7 p.m. in person.
May 24th, we have a regularly scheduled zoning board of appeals meeting that evening.
Okay, so that won't work.
Tuesdays might be tough because every other Tuesday, well, water and sewer meets, I guess, just once. EDC meets every other Tuesday.
What about the 23rd, the Monday?
That's planning and zoning.
Oh.
So 20, but so Memorial Day must be the 30th.
Yeah,
So what about Tuesday, the 31st?
I can do that. Is that okay with you guys?
Sure.
Tuesday, the 31st at 7 p.m. at Town Hall.
Yep.
3rd floor? Or 2nd floor, right?
Second.
Okay, so I'll work on, for our next meeting, I'll work on some slides that, you know, to present, as well as a flyer for that forum. And we'll think about how we can get the best feedback possible in person. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, I've kept you long enough, I think. Anything else you guys want to talk about today before we sign off for today? I hope you guys can all get outside soon. Okay, so we meet again on May 11th. Feel free to contact me between now and then if there's anything you want to talk about in terms of these strategies or the plan or any of it. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Jess.
Very good.
Jocelyn.
Thank you.
Thank you.